Russia, the Justice Department revealing that Attorney General Jeff Sessions met twice with Russia's top diplomat, the same one that Mike Flynn did. And this happened during the 2016 race while he was an advisor for Donald Trump's campaign. This matters especially because Sessions repeatedly denied having any contact during his Senate confirmation process. Let's bring in New York Times columnist and author of Thank You for Being Late, An Optimist's Guide to Thriving in the Age of Accelerations. Catchy title. Thomas Friedman. Good to have you with us, Tom. Now, let's start first with why this matters. Do you believe this is a question of poor disclosure, or does it go all the way to lying? How do you see this?
Well, I think those who suggested that Jeff Sessions perjured himself in his testimony have a lot of evidence for that, Chris. He was asked this, as you have reported this morning, both in verbal interview and in written. So he had many opportunities to clarify that, yes, I did meet with him. We discussed, he could have said Senate Armed Services business, but he didn't. And it gets back to the core issue, which is that something stinks. Something stinks terribly about this Russian intervention question. That the president, from the beginning of this campaign, has been out there speaking kindly about Vladimir Putin. We now have his surrogate during the campaign, now Attorney General, denying contacts. His national security advisor engaged in contacts and then misled the vice president about them. You know, it's so obvious that these people do not want to disclose something. And let's not forget that the president, after promising to do so, has now refused to disclose his tax returns, which people wonder isn't because they suggest financial links between himself and Russian investors who have probably very dodgy connections, with the Kremlin or Russian intelligence.
So, Tom, today, Attorney General Sessions is saying that he thought the questions basically were about whether or not he met as a Trump surrogate during the campaign, about campaign business, if he discussed with the Russian ambassador anything about the campaign, and that he met with him as a senator on the Armed Services Committee about that. But why do you think aren't more Republicans up in arms about this?
Ellie, I think it's one of the most shameful things I have seen in almost 30 years being in Washington, D.C. I believe the fact that our three leading intelligence agencies, the NSA, CIA, and FBI, have all publicly concluded that Russia intervened in our election. Did it make Donald Trump president decisively? No one can say that. I accept Donald Trump is the legal, legitimate president. Many things went into his victory. But the fact that our three intelligence agencies have concluded this, and the Republican Party, the party of patriotism, the party that made a central fact of its campaign, the fact that Hillary Clinton had a private server that might, but without any evidence, have been hacked, by the Russians. The fact that we know Russia hacked our elections. Look, on 9/11, we lost 3,000 of our brothers and sisters. On Pearl Harbor, we lost thousands of people. These were huge events. I don't compare it in terms of lives lost, but in terms of import. This was a direct assault on the very thing that makes us unique as a nation. The fact that we rotate power legally, freely, okay, and we don't challenge that. And the fact that the Russians attacked this, that for less than the price of a MiG-29, for less than the price of a MiG-29, Vladimir Putin intervened in our election and helped to create to elect a chaos candidate, which is exactly what Putin wants, because he is out to destroy the West. The fact that the Republican Party is sitting there on its hands, not responding to this, looking the other way and looking for excuses for it, is one of the most shameful national security cases I have ever seen in Washington, D.C.
What do you see as the likely explanations that are going to come up here? Let's dismiss what we're hearing from the White House, and in no small measure of irony from a Russian official, that this is about the media and about political playing. Let's put that to the side because there's just too many facts here to deal with. What is the best defense for Sessions? Is it that I thought we were talking about specific discussions about elections? I thought we were talking about only in my role as a surrogate for the election, for the campaign. What is his best defense?
Well, you know, Chris, your question begs another one for me, which is all Sessions had to say is, are you asking me that question in my role as a surrogate, or are you asking me that question in my role as a senator?
Except he included that in his response when he said, you know what, I've been called a surrogate and I've had no contact. So he kind of swallowed that context himself already. And now, look, his defenders will say yes, which proves even more that this was done in good faith because it came out from the DOJ eventually anyway. He obviously didn't think that this was relevant. Is that enough?
I don't think anyone's going to buy it. You know, it gets back to, you know, what is the meaning of is and what is the meaning of a surrogate. You know, Chris, I'm on the staff of Golf Digest as a hobby. I want you to know I'm actually here as the Golf Digest correspondent, not as the New York Times correspondent. So if I say anything bad, please talk to Golf Digest, not to Arthur Sulzberger at the New York Times.
Got it. The New York Times, that other place you work, is reporting that the Obama administration tried to sound the alarm to Congress about this before they handed over the reins to the new Trump administration. They sent documents, paperwork to members of Congress trying to talk about these connections. What do we know?
Well, you know, we reported that this morning, that basically they tried to create paper trails and actually get information they had into the hands of, I know, someone like Senator Ben Cardin, as much as they could, in effect, Ali, to lock it away, to put it in a safe, so when the new team came in, it could not be erased. And it doesn't surprise me at all, and I think it's important to know that, but it's also gives me some assurance that there are people in the intelligence community that know what went on here. You know, these are people who are, in my experience, largely bipartisan. They're trying to get it right. They're ready to serve the president, but they do not like having their integrity attacked, and they're certainly not going to be a party to a cover-up. I am sure of that.
But you now have two curious pieces of information. You have one that the White House was alerted about the Russian responsibility for the hacks near the end of the election and kind of underplayed it. You know, didn't really come out and say anything, and there are different reasons for why they did it that way. Now there's a second one where they had a reason to believe that you needed to preserve intelligence, and they kind of did something with it. Maybe they gave it to a senator, but no full-throated appeal for justice at that time or earlier when they got the information about the hacking. Is there room for criticism in that?
Chris, I think so. I've always been troubled by the fact, you remember that President Obama, and maybe in his last press conference, I believe that he said that this first came up in September, this evidence of Russian intervention, and he told Putin to knock it off. Knock it off. You know, that's what I say to someone in the quiet car on the Acela if I hear them using their cell phone. Not someone
you're
who's
one of those?
That's me.
Yeah.
You're one of those,
not someone who's intervening in our election. And I found that really disturbing, I have to say.
You know, very quickly, I know that you want to call out or give a shout out to Lindsey Graham and John McCain. You know, they are a little bit in the wilderness of trying to beat this drum and tell people how important these possible connections are.
I think it's so important what John McCain and Lindsey Graham have done. I watched part of their discussion last night on
good.
CNN. Susan Collins as well. These are real patriots. And I think at some point you have to ask, who I think are also real patriots, who wore the uniform, Jim Mattis, General Kelly, General McMaster. Are you going to be a party to this cover-up? Your whole careers were in part based on defending us against Russian attacks on our democratic system. And so I think there's some real issues here. And, you know, there's a point I made last time I was on. I really want to stress it. Something my friend, you know, Dov Seidman says, he's in the book. There's a big difference between formal authority and moral authority. Trump keeps telling us about his formal authority. I won. Get used to it. But he, every day, has been diminishing his moral authority. Moral authority is very hard to get. And I think this administration is going to wake up one day. They're going to need to look the American people in the eye and say, trust me on this. And I've got formal authority. And people are going to say, you may have formal authority. But when you've played around with the truth so many times like this, you have no moral authority. And in a crisis, that is going to be a huge crisis for our leadership.
Tom Friedman, great to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.